Welcome, gentlemen. As we did with the other panelists, if we could start off with you introducing yourself and a brief pitch, if you will, of your programs under your purview.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us. And my name is Patrik Fagerstedt. I'm a senior research officer at the Swedish Research Council, which is hosting the secretariat for the JPIs. And if I take the pitch directly, since I have it written down in front of me now. So the JPIs aims to coordinate and support all types of research that can contribute to our ability to treat infections to microbes also in the future. As you know, the increasing threat of bacteria resistant to antibiotics spreading in hospitals, the community, among farm animals and the environment may prevent many aspects of modern healthcare in the future if we don't do something. And our remit does not only include research on developing new antibiotics, but also research for better and more rapid diagnostics, improved stewardship of existing drugs by decreasing unnecessary use, and improve infection control. And in this global effort, we are now 27 countries very interested in developing and strengthening the collaboration with U.S. agencies in all these areas.
Thank you, Patrick. Dr. Dixon?
Thank you, Jesse. Wow, these are tough questions. So my name is Dennis Dixon, and I'm from the National Institutes of Health, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. I'm a point person for antimicrobial resistance, and that happened because I'm chief of the bacteriology and mycology branch, which hosts many of the hospital pathogens and the poster children that are problematic for treatment these days because of losing effectiveness to the existing antibacterial agents. And that led to a series of activities starting in probably 1999 with the Senator Ted Kennedy hearing on antimicrobial resistance, and then moved on to such things as the Transatlantic Task Force on Antimicrobial Resistance, and I sit on that for the NIH. And I would commend Sweden, first of all, for their responsible involvement in this topic, and they were responsible with the Prime Minister Mats Ulfendal and President Barack Obama in establishing the TATFAR. And also sit on the Presidential Advisory Council on Antibacterial Resistance for combating antibacterial resistance. And that's CARB, and was involved in helping to develop the national strategy on CARB from the NIH part of that. And so clearly antimicrobial resistance is a global public health problem. It's a top priority for NIH and NIAID, and we are hitting that full force with better means to diagnose, prevent, and treat the infections responsible.
Wonderful, great. Start off with, if we can, and you mentioned some of these already, what were the steps in the past that have led you to this point where you are actually contemplating deeper collaboration?
Well, I think that the JPIs, when it started about 7-8 years ago, already from the beginning, one of the first steps was, of course, to develop a joint strategic research agenda. And in this work, of course, we looked over the Atlantic to see what is happening in the US and in the agencies responsible for the same questions there. I think already then there was a strong interaction between our countries in sort of developing the ideas for this research agenda, great input from the US and collaboration already there. And many of the scientists that are funded by European research agencies, of course, already have a strong scientific collaboration with scientists here in the US funded by US agencies. So it's two very sort of compatible sides to work together in this area, very natural, and a lot of collaborations already existing on the scientific level.
Specific examples? Maybe workshops where you were together or that you had chance meetings or side meetings?
I can take the historical approach and say that our first exposure to JPIs came at the invitation of Mats Ulfendal, who invited Francis Collins to send a representative to the, I think it was 2013 Brussels inaugural meeting that laid out the strategic plan or action plan of JPI AMR, and so I was chosen to go and participate in that meeting and met the people. And so in keeping with the TATFAR, which I think really was instructive to me and to the U.S. and engaging in this topic internationally, the mandate of TATFAR was better communication, collaboration, and coordination. It didn't require special funding. It didn't require new governing bodies. It was how do you communicate, collaborate, and cooperate around the topic of resistance and 3 specified types of resistance issues. And so that continued the collaboration, coordination, and networking, and having met Patrick and other colleagues in MOTS at the first meeting, and when we had a specific need for addressing a particular resistance topic, we partnered with JPI AMR and with TATFAR in a series of workshops in Stockholm in 2016. And these were jointly sponsored, and they specifically addressed resistance. There was a 2-day meeting that was around the basic research aspects. I think that's a little bit easier because basic research by its nature is international, and international scientists find each other through the publication and international meetings, and this sort of formalized that and encouraged 2 specific countries, Sweden and the United States, to see who has common interest, because the speakers on each side came with an interest and built from there. The other 2 meetings were, one, a grants meeting where the U.S. NIH explained to Stockholm and to the Scandinavian countries, because this was open to all the other regional countries who joined in this, including in the program. And that's expanding your network. It's communicating, it's collaborating. And it told the world there what the requirements are for the NIH programs, which are most of them open to anyone anywhere in the world. And here's how our calls work. You can partner with your country people and ours and come in with grants and so forth and so on. The third one is the most interesting to me because it's ongoing. I'll wait to tell you more about that one, but I'll just say that to me, a key need in the drug pipeline is the last step, and that's access to patients to determine whether these drug candidates are safe and effective in helping to treat their infections. And for resistant infections, there is this oddity. Even though it's a huge problem and we tell everybody how many people are sick, there are not enough of them in one hospital to effectively enroll a trial without having a lot of hospitals where the next epidemic emerges. They're episodic and sporadic. And so that enigma makes it almost unapproachable for many companies to do trials there. So we had a specific meeting around how do we align resources with different countries who have the same needs so we can do together something we can't do by ourselves. And I presented one particular trial on colistin, used alone or in combination, where we were struggling to enroll it in the U.S. Rather than give up to failure, I put out a plea for European countries, and lo and behold, that led to a partnership with the Innovative Medicines Initiative. And I'll say more about that in the future, because when you ask what are we doing now, I'll share my excitement on how we were able to reach that goal. And we didn't have to join the JPI AMR. We didn't have to, because we have everything we need to do what we need to do, and that's knowing who you're going to call for a case-by-case example to work together as collaborators on a common problem.
And like Dennis was saying, this kind of meetings that we had in Stockholm led to real cooperation and collaboration among the scientists present. And it was not only Swedish and Nordic scientists, it was invited scientists for all of the JPIMR countries. And I think based on this model that we have started or developed together with the NIH, I also had meetings this week with the USDA, NIFA, and the CDC, and the same type of possibilities exist there in other research areas to try to find opportunities for the scientists that we're already funding, have them to go and meet and talk to each other, present their data, present their projects, and then I think we will see new collaborations where we might step in from each side and fund and strengthen this work later on also. That's
great. In fact, you had a bilateral meeting right before this workshop at 12 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. This is breaking news.
Called lunch.
You can call it whatever you may. Are there any concrete steps that you can share at this point from that, or we can branch out into future areas of collaboration, whether future workshops or future topics or future actions that you see as realistic?
Well, why don't I pick up on the example, and everybody was just dying to hear the conclusion to that. And so when we left that meeting in January in 2016 in Stockholm, I thought it was great to go there. I love seeing the shorter day and the cold weather, and just so happened to escape a 3-foot snowfall in the United States at that time. It was kind of ironic. But no one stepped forward at that meeting to say, we want to join the trial. We want to help Keith Kay. And Keith was there at the end of the day. And my colleague says, be a little bit more patient. You know, it takes a while for that to happen. Within 3 weeks, we heard from Keith Kay that there had been a call, and collaborators from the Innovative Medicines Initiative and Combact were interested in partnering. And within the space of a year, we went from an idea to site visiting potential sites. And in between that was our investigator, which is done, so this is a standalone project. It's not really a network. It's a multi-center clinical trial that's struggling to enroll. And the leadership of that sent a draft of the protocol and the patient criteria for enrollment to Combact, and they circulated it to a selective number of sites that they knew had experience with that particular set of infections. We went through a series of conference calls, weekly conference calls, identified a top tier of sites, sent our contractors over to site visit those sites, and we have already now, so that was within 1 year. We were reaching out to those sites. We've just funded the first countries, and already Israel, the first 2 sites are enrolling 5 subjects per month in each of those. We have 10 more, so we have 12 hospitals scattered throughout the Combact network. And if our enrollment continues the way it's headed now, we'll be done in a year and a half. And this was a trial that companies said you can't do it. And so that's exciting to me. I do hope we get there. Hope I haven't jinxed it by sharing the enthusiasm. And I see that the next idea, we don't know what it is yet. But when we know what it is, we'll know whom the logical partners are. We'll have our directory of people to call and can work together on the next problem, because of these global problems, we need partnerships, and they may be different for each particular case.
No, I agree, and I think even though both the JPA and our countries by themselves have quite a lot of power to sort of conduct this type of big trials, and the US has it as well, but in the end there will be so much need to do this and to expand these to include enough patients, so we have to work together in this area, and I think this is definitely one area where we will see more collaborations. Great.
At this time, I'd open it up to the audience for any questions that you might have.
Microphones.
I'm a consultant. To what extent are you able to conduct things over the internet and get consensus on the objectives and where the funding is coming from?
The project I described just required aligning a project in the United States with a project in the European Union, and that particular trial we funded. And Combact just joined in conference calls over the internet too, and email. And when we arrived at where we wanted to fund, they essentially became subcontractor sites under our contract. And so money just flowed through to the sites that were selected. So it was driven by partners that were found and criteria that were met through knowing where to call and whom to seek. And each case could be different. We didn't talk about basic science, but the first 2 days of the workshop has stimulated interactions with researchers who go on their own to decide if they want to write a grant and send that in together to our normal funding steps, or perhaps to those in the European Union on the other side.
And I think, in this type of collaborations, like the joint programming initiatives with us, for in our case, 27 countries all over the globe, we have Japan to Argentina to South Africa and Egypt. most of our meetings and connections between each other is through electronic means nowadays. It's very few physical meetings that is possible to organize this kind of membership.
Additional question?
Thanks. Hello. I was wondering, how have differing regulations in all of the partner countries, for instance, with a regulation of antibiotic treatment of livestock and the like, has that been at all a barrier to developing strategies and regulations and monitoring and any kind of thing that you do in your collaborations? Thanks.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. My name's Cato Sanford. I just started the National Academy of Sciences.
I think some of the challenges we encountered were just as you mentioned, the regulatory differences between the United States and the European Union in our clinical trial. We discovered two new things that we needed to do when we went into Europe that our contractor says, oh, here's the extra bills we're going to need to get those done. So just this week I've had to go back to our directors and said, could we please have some additional resources because we didn't know about the EMA rule for sponsoring the drug in Europe, even though it's a licensed drug in this case. This trial, I should mention, is a public service type of a trial because there isn't an industrial sponsor for something that was developed in the 50s. And we're trying to optimize its use. So you don't just look for the best new and exciting new thing out there. How do you use best the drugs you have while you're ready to create new ones? And yet even that licensed drug needed a lot of regulatory coverage that we were not aware of that wasn't just covered by filing to the regulatory agency. It required infrastructure that we had to pay for. And that is a challenge that we're working on right now.
I think when it concerns agriculture in Europe, a lot of that is under the same directives or legislations nowadays. But if you look at sort of Europe versus other countries, the different regulations and practices can also pose an advantage when it comes to research because you have comparative sort of study objects to actually look at when you try to implement new prevention or intervention measures. So it's actually can be an advantage for the researchers to have access to different legal or practices in the different countries.
Additional questions?
Hi, my name is Heather Sipo. I'm with the George Washington University. And you speak about collaboration amongst nations and agencies and what have you, but for tackling an issue such as this, to what extent do you collaborate with across sectors? So working with pharmaceutical companies or other various stakeholders that might be working on the issue beyond just national borders? And what challenges have you encountered in terms of those additional collaborations? Thank you.
Well, the JPI's main mission is to support and coordinate the research part. And of course, that is not going to solve the whole problem of antimicrobial resistance. I mean, there are a lot of needs for policy uptake of the research results that can sort of change the picture. And we are working within the JPI. We have also ambitions to support the member states to improve policy uptake and sort of inclusion of other stakeholders or healthcare. But it's not our main mission because obviously this is very often a national question which we can only support and facilitate and show on sort of best practices and experiences from countries and then perhaps improve the work in the other member states. Yes.
And from the NIH side, we spend a lot of effort and time engaging the relative industries for bringing us ultimately better drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics, because no matter what research we do, we don't bottle and sell products. We come up with the science that informs the candidates that move forward. And this is a fragile area with antibacterial development because it's not clearly a money-making proposition. TATFAR has had an incentives committee that looks at the incentives that you fund through funding agencies that just push, and then there's a need for pull, what is like a market entry award to lower the risk for companies to come into this area. On the push side, we have a number of preclinical services where we provide free services at every step of the drug manufacturing process or vaccine manufacturing process, whether it's screening in animals, whether it's pilot scale up of material for running in a trial, or whether it's helping to conduct the clinical trial where we partner with small businesses, academic people, and even big pharma to encourage them to move forward into this area of critical public health need that doesn't have a lot of market incentive to it right now. And so it's a key thing where we try and influence their thinking by providing resources and incentives along those lines.
And the JPI is supporting research on new economical model or business models or in health economy. How could we sort of facilitate more companies or give them incentives to actually do research and develop these new medicines that are necessary?
I think a key example is your European Innovative Medicines Initiative, which is the public-private partnership with bringing new products to market. And just another benefit that came out of the Stockholm meeting, that one event that just got people together. We also took our antibacterial resistance leadership group, clinical trial network leaders over to that, where they met people from IMI. And they're just now joining the IMI trial for Staphylococcus and Pseudomonas on antibody approaches with the company. And so that came about by knowing people you hadn't met before and opportunities to help when enrollment needs a boost, to bring your centers forward and put our money in to the European money. It doesn't require a formal memorandum to do that. Is we can provide sites, we can enroll subjects, you let us see the protocol and tell us what we need to do to match your enrollment criteria. So that's a great way how you can, that's alignment of resources that comes from learning who your partners need to be to get where you want to go.
I think we have time for one quick question in the front here. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm still John White from the Consortium for Ocean Leadership. So a lot of people in this room, especially the ocean cult, know that the ocean is largely unexplored. We also are coming to believe more and more that it is unexplored, especially in terms of the development of medical treatments, antimicrobials. I just recently heard about a research effort looking at some newly discovered ocean-borne bacteria that produce chemicals that attack the hardened biofilms of harmful agents such as anthrax. Apparently nothing else can do it like these do, I don't know. But my question is, do you share the enthusiasm that we have for looking at the ocean as possibly the next panacea in terms of the actual development or discovery of antimicrobials and other medical benefits?
Yes, definitely. I think many of the national agencies that are part of the JPAMR are supporting projects like that, where you are harvesting the oceans for new bacteria, new resistance sort of combating mechanisms. So there is already funding in that area, although the JPI in itself have not yet have a consortium like that, but it will come, I'm sure.
And I can say I share your enthusiasm for that. I believe one of the projects that you may be referring to is in the program in my group. And that was, we didn't specify oceans, we specified what we needed. And then the community tells us how to get there, because it's a grassroots effort. We look for the brain power to solve the problem we pose, and that is we need alternatives to conventional antimicrobials. We can't just be making another generation of an existing chemical compound. And so that was looking at new sources of new natural products, in addition to looking at phage therapy, looking at the immune system in the host, looking at microbial ecology. And there was a project that had a special call for funding that looked at materials from sponges that have a way to prevent biofilms because they express molecules that control consortia of bacteria in the environment. So looking at these kinds of chemicals things may be useful in human treatment. So that came about through the opportunity to solve a problem with that particular source.
Wonderful, great. Speaking of the ocean, we're now going to move to the third panel, which is on oceans, marine, and climate. So thank you very much to Dennis and to Patrick.